get my speaker on. Good morning. Welcome to our first of probably 2 days of budget session that we'll go over. I certainly want to, Dave, we're about ready to go. Great, ready to go. Thank all of you for being here, and we're going to have our FY24 budget review this morning. And I do want to mention that we are broadcasting live on YouTube or Facebook. So anybody can go to our website, they can click on YouTube or Facebook links, and you can watch this meeting live. With that being said, I'll turn it over to our county manager. We have some presentations, and then we'll have deliberations, and we'll see how we're going. And we're going to start with a budget overview. I know I'll let the county manager introduce it.
Okay, very good. Good morning, everyone. You have a lot of paper in front of you, and I know that we have done that to you. So let me help you navigate it a little bit. You've got this document, which is really our worksheet that takes us from where we were with the budget book. There were some modifications to the numbers that kind of bring us to sort of the current place. The board had requested, and I actually included my manager's recommended alternate service levels in there. We took a quick look at that. And then obviously down at the bottom of this page are Board of County Commissioner adjustments. Anything you modify off of anything in the continuation budget, anything in the alternate service level, as you put together sort of your dreams and goals and wishes for this budget, you can kind of keep track of them down there. Obviously get those to Kyle or any of his staff, and we'll certainly be able to do that. And so that's kind of our guiding document to get for the negotiations and sort of get this budget to where y'all need it to be. We also put the special appropriations list in front of you because there's almost a sort of a mini budget around those. Just a reminder that there's $1,319,927 that's actually included in the continuation budget for those purposes. You also have, we met yesterday. We always pull a bunch of staff in and we do a detailed review of the budget ordinance. And so we read through that. And obviously this is the document that the sort of the end goal document. And so the numbers now don't reflect all the changes, but the numbers will change, but the structure of the document is pretty much where I think the attorney's taken a look at it, and we've made some changes, and we'll be able to go over the details of those changes later when it's presented to you. You have responses to questions that bubbled up through the that's going to drive me nuts. I got to shut that off. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Great. So there were questions that bubbled up in the detailed review, and so we've got those. Part of this agenda today is actually to step through those, and so we'll be able to dive pretty deeply into that. And then you've got a couple other things. You've got, when you adopt the budget, you're also adopting a pay plan. And so we've got the pay plan with the recommended changes in front of you, and we can spend some time and go through that. And then the other thing is you have a fee schedule because you're also adopting the fees that we charge folks when they interact with county government. We are not heavy into fees the way the city is. Very little of our budget actually is driven from fees, but that is part and parcel of that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle Wolf. Let Kyle take you sort of up to speed on where we are. As you can see, you have a host of staff resources in front of you. So anything you need, any questions you have, I think we've got the brain trust here to be ready to answer any questions.
So that's what a brain trust looks like.
That's a good-looking brain trust. Yeah, it really is. We just got started.
Good morning, commissioners. Thanks for being here, and thanks for all your help so far in this budget. And unfortunately, we do have a little bit more work to do. So Okay. I was thinking it was this one. All right. So, as you recall from, a couple weeks ago when we presented the budget to you, here in this room, and then last week when we did the detailed budget presentation, the manager's recommended budget for FY24 is balanced at $569,204,417. That includes $3,164,052 that's in a budget reserve for alternate service level consideration for you. At the end of last week's detailed budget presentation, Dudley kind of walked through this a little bit and told you, that there have been a few adjustments after we gave the budget document to you. And so one of those is some carryover gun and gang violence funds in youth services that we did not put in there, and so it was not in there in the actual budget document book itself, and so we're adding $322,863 of those carryover funds on the revenue side, and then also on the expenditure side. And then as we were kind of going back through departments, we had spoken with MIS during their budget meeting. There's a contract for a service called Duo, which is our two-factor authentication service. And that contract was going up significantly, and it was basically because it wasn't an annualized contract. And so Gary was able to convince them to let us do that. And so because of that, and then also we found some duplicate entries when we created basically a cybersecurity OCA. And we moved costs over into that OCA, but we forgot to take them out of the other one. And so the result of those is a savings of $413,625. And so there's an expenditure reduction. And then, as you remember from the bond sale, there was some, really it was more on the interest side, some decreased interest. And so that reduced expenditures by $401,039. And because of that, we had appropriated, because of debt leveling, we had appropriated some additional debt leveling reserves. And because that expenditure came down, that revenue also comes down. And so you can see that savings there. And so what we are essentially doing after making those adjustments is we are increasing the budget reserve that is available for appropriation for alternate service level consideration by $470,078. So increases it to $3.6 million. Bringing you to a new recommended continuation budget balance at $569,182,694. So, as Dudley mentioned, also he is recommending some alternate service level requests, and they are listed here. The first three are in emergency services for 8 advanced EMTs with equipment. And that's offset by a little bit of revenue. 2 shift supervisors with equipment with no revenue, and 2 equipment technicians with no revenue. And so you can see those expenditures increasing there, but also increasing some revenue. One of the other things is on the fire side, there were some requests on the fire side, and so the recommendation is to actually just complete a detailed review of our overlay district and consider expansion of the 09 program once that's complete. So there's no recommendation on the expenditure or revenue side at this point for that one. And then in the sheriff's office, he is recommending extending the sign-on bonus to December of 2023. The drones as a first responder, alternate service level of $100,000. The temporary staffing and permits, extending that for $39,400. Reclassing an animal control officer to a corporal position, which is $22,257. And then adding another deputy in rural hall as part of our community policing program, which would increase expenditures by $162,054. It's offset by some revenue. And so that's the sheriff's office. In EAP, Dudley was recommending the closing down of the Pofftown and Kernersville recycling centers, which would be a savings of $200,000. It would keep the Haynesville location open. And then in DSS, you've got 3 alternate service levels that are recommended: a senior social work program manager for the children's division, intercom paging system, and then some funds for Medicaid expansion. With DSS, a lot of that is tied to revenue, and so there's some offsetting revenue as well. There's a public health, environmental health specialist for $75,763, no revenue impact. And then the DSS Focus replacement would be considered with PAYGO. And then in parks, another PAYGO consideration would be the Tanglewood Park Yadkin River Nature Overlook. And then you've got $5,000 for an increase in tuition reimbursement funding. So the total amount of those recommendations is an expenditure of $1,704,558. It's offset by some revenue again of $316,814, which would reduce the budget reserve by $1,387,744. So again, we had started at $3,164,052 up here. After the adjustments that we made here, they went up to $3.6 million. And then based on Dudley's alternate service level recommendations, it would reduce the amount available for alternate service level consideration to $2,246,386. And then the budget would be balanced at $569,499,508. And again, leaving $2,246,386 for alternate service level consideration by the board. And then again, as Dudley mentioned, you also have the special appropriations sheet, which is another $1,319,927 available to allocate, because again, we have not allocated any of these funds in the continuation budget. It is all in a budget reserve. So really, that's a total of $3,566,313 remaining to allocate out of between these two sheets. And
Can I ask some questions
Yes,
about
sir.
this part? If you go back up to the sheriff's office extend the sign-on bonus piece, why is there not an expenditure? Why is that blank? Because it's going to cost something, obviously, to extend that.
to be honest with you, I'm not really sure. I think it was because we had. I think it will come from salary savings. Is essentially where it will come.
Yeah,
from.
our intentions were, we know we've budgeted those positions, and we've included salary savings at a normal level in the rest of the budget. We know out of those salary savings, we're taking the private security contract, and then we also believe that you could do this with those dollars, that there would be sufficient salary slippage to do that, so you just don't need to budget it.
Trying to get at the sort of the general reconciliation of that. And the other part on help me understand in the sheriff's office, the temporary staffing and permits. Because if I understood it, basically the permitting issue no longer exists from the legislature, both in terms of permit, for carry conceal as well as gun permits. So why are we continuing additional contract folks to do what is no longer required?
Right. I think the sheriff or the sheriff's office would probably like to speak to that. I know when it was something that we took out in our budget, in the budget process. We did not include it in the recommended budget. They put it in as an alternate service
Yeah,
level.
let's let Kimberly, maybe hand her the mic, let her, you just want to, let Kimberly. Yeah, I'd ask Kim Bussey to do a pretty detailed review of what that was, and so based on that, I think I've got half of the request in there, so.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, or good morning, Commissioners. So we did take a look at the workload and the types of permits that were being processed in the Sheriff's Office for this issue, because Kyle's right, I initially did not include it in the recommended budget. But upon, I guess, further review of what specifically the duties were there, fingerprinting was increasing significantly. Those, I guess, fingerprinting duties are not associated with the concealed carry or the pistol permits are increasing, and concealed carry permits are increasing. The pistol permits were not. And so when we took a look at just strictly workload, we did feel like there may be enough increase in those other duties and responsibilities to allow for one of the positions that they are requesting, not both. This contracted service has been in the sheriff's office budget for several years, I think maybe 6 or 7 years.
So one
I know that, but we
clarification.
just eliminated the reason we added it.
Right.
One clarification, pistol permits are no longer processed by the sheriff's department, but concealed carry permits are. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I'm just reading the paper. I mean, I thought for sure
There was a bill to do away with concealed carry permits.
And it did not pass?
I don't believe it's passed yet. It could still pass, but the pistol permits are no longer.
Right, I knew that. That part, I knew passed both House and Senate.
And so the workload with concealed carry is still there. And so based on Ms. Bussey's work, really diving into what that was, my recommendation was to restore half of that back.
Well, if the concealed carry ends, then does this end?
That's maybe a different story at that point. But currently, concealed carry exists. Fingerprinting duties and responsibilities are still increases, and in fact, revenues associated with those two things are increasing currently. So,
And probably on this list, I think keeping $200,000 for Medicaid expansion, I mean, I think we've had I've read all that stuff in the basic state budget is to provide ample funds and that no county is supposed to be paying for expansion costs on that.
Mr. Chairman, I think we still do not have clarity on that. We recently attended an NCACC meeting that DHHS was on. We are anticipating receiving some upfront money from the state. They have stated we were supposed to get it at the end of May. I'm not aware that we have yet. And we are unclear whether or not the county will still be responsible for the 25% reimbursement that we typically are for Medicaid costs. So we just wanted to put a little bit of a cushion in the budget, just given the uncertainty. But certainly if we don't need it, we won't use it. We just wanted to budget just to ensure we had a little cushion.
I'm probably not in favor of that, but I'll
It
let
is,
that
I
go
will
for the moment.
say, what we are hearing formally through administrative channels does not match up with what we're hearing from individual legislators.
Correct.
There's a disconnect. And obviously, the legislators get to decide what it is, but we are hearing a pretty big disconnect.
I just guess in my mind, there's a lot of variability in the entire budget. And the question becomes, it's almost like how much contingency is being built into the budget? And I had the belief that there was not much contingency being built into the budget, but this is exactly what that is, and it's being identified that way. And it begins to make me question the issue, how much contingency is built into every department budget? I mean, how much contingency is built into the budget? Because it never shows up except in overestimates of expenditures, and how far does that go? And that gets to be sort of an interesting question. I mean, it's a philosophical way of budgeting that sometimes folks don't have the luxury to afford that.
Yeah, remember that we've appropriated about $15 million in fund balance, and if there are sufficient funds in the budget, and I think we've got a pretty good history of not spending it. And so, and you're exactly right. We've talked about it over the years, but it is philosophical around that. This is absolutely contingency, that $200,000. And it's really based on uncertainty and a lack of clarity between what we're hearing from DSS and what we're hearing from it's kind of the administrative side of Health and Human Services versus the legislative side,
And last question I have, it actually relates to that.
Yeah.
And that is, because I always think, in terms of last year, amount of fund balance budgeted, how much actually was used from the FY23 estimate to be used in the next few weeks to the end?
No, at this point, we're not anticipating using any fund balance this year.
So
Actual fund balance?
you anticipate that to be zero?
Yes.
Okay.
Appropriated funds appropriated fund balance is always our target for reversions, and that's really more of a board policy. I mean, that but as you know, it's dependent on a whole lot of factors, and one of which is that we would return to some normalcy around hiring, and we're hopeful that will happen, but that has been a real challenge. And that's really why I feel comfortable with the Sheriff's Department extending the sign-on bonus to December of '23. We will have to do a budget ordinance amendment and move some money out of salaries to pay those. Well, no, because bonus is a salary, so it won't matter anyway. But we've spent very little of that bonus money that was set aside. And so you'll see when we close out June 30th, you'll see a pretty substantial amount that we didn't spend that will return back to fund balance and probably help fund some PAYGO type activities. So.
I got it. Thank you.
That's really an overview of where we're at right now at this point.
So again, this is your meeting, so any questions you have, you can stop us. We'll go ahead and jump to the next item, which was our fire tax district review. I think every budget year in the detailed review session, Damon gets bumped and does not get to do his fire tax district review, so we've always done that in this session coming back, so. All right.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chair and Commissioners. So this year, the general summary for the fire tax districts, for those who may not be as familiar, we have 16 volunteer departments that serve 25 districts, whether fire tax districts that they were initially designed to serve or districts that have gone out of service. And so then a fire department has picked up more than one district, or a service district that's been set up that doesn't have a particular fire district that's home-based there. There are 3 requests in the current year for fire tax district tax rate increases. Those are with Griffith, that's asking for a 2-cent increase, King requesting a 0.12 of a cent increase, and Mineral Springs is requesting a 0.5 cent increase. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Kind of the anatomy of the fire departments. This is on two slides, actually. This is the first one.
Do we have that? I'm sorry. Do we have that print out?
It was in the presentation from last week.
I didn't see it.
And so never didn't get to it last week. So
Okay. That's fine. Thank you. I'll find it later.
we can print it off and get it to you.
Yeah, we'll get you some copies.
Is it in this book right here?
It should be.
Okay,
Part
I'll
of
find
the
it.
presentation last week, or maybe it's not in there. It's not in there, but it was in the PowerPoint presentation that for the detailed workshop.
okay.
We just never got to it.
Okay, thank you.
Just never got to it. So here's kind of the anatomy of the fire tax districts. So in this first column is the departments. You can see their tax base, the current rate. So in Beeson Crossroads, it's 9.5 cents. The rate that's being requested, so again for Beeson Crossroads, it's still 9.5 cents. The per penny equivalent is $40,808 in Beeson's, and then you can see what revenue that generates. So what I kind of wanted you to get out of this particular slide, and also the ones in yellow are asking for tax increases, is that the tax bases are wide-ranging, and the revenue that yields is also wide-ranging. So you can see that in Clemens, they have a $3.3 billion tax base. Louisville has a $2.3 billion tax base. And then you can have a department like Mineral Springs, for example, between the 2 districts here, and then that's $232 million tax base. So what that generates in a Clemens, for example, is annual operating revenue of almost $2 million, $1.9 million in Louisville, but then also in Mineral Springs, it's generating $276,000. And so what's to be understood there is that the cost to buy a fire truck is the same regardless of whether or not you have a big tax base or a small tax base.
Yeah.
The cost of employees is the same, whether or not you have a big tax base or a small tax base. So with that, only, again, 3 fire departments are asking for increases. So these are, all of them are on this page, actually. So King, which again, there's their tax rate increases they're asking for at 0.12 of a cent. Forest Hill, Mineral Springs, the Mineral Springs Service District are all served by the Mineral Springs Volunteer Fire Department. So all of them are going from 11.5 cents to 12 cents. And then the last one is Griffith, which asks for a 2-cent increase from 6.5 cents to 8.5 cents. And then just for information, these are the rest of the departments here. So none of them are in yellow because they're not asking for increases. But again, you can see kind of how the bases can range. So South Fork, which is served by Clemens, at $8 million in tax base versus a Piney Grove at $740 million in tax base. So just wildly ranging. So
If you-
on the
if you
departments
leave-
that are asking for increases,
Yeah, Damon, I think one thing to show on that one slide is really the range of tax rate equivalents is really telling. So,
per penny.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, for example, on this page, Vienna is another of our wealthier tax bases at almost $1 billion. There's $98,000 per penny versus a Salem Chapel, this is their entire tax district that they depend upon. It's them $10,000 per penny. So for each cent, Vienna is $88,000 better, basically, than would be Salem Chapel. So it's just wildly different, which relies on the rates because the departments with the wealthier tax bases can have a lower rate because they're getting a bigger yield per penny. And then the departments that are smaller, that have a smaller tax base, tend to have higher tax rates, just trying to generate revenue, be able to carry out their business, buying fire trucks, paying employees. Yeah, first department here that's asking for an increase is Griffith. So that increase would take them to 8.5 cents from 6.5. That's a 2-cent increase. They're also requesting 2 cents from Davidson County as well. The main driver there is they want to add 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time swing employees. And that's to ensure that there's 2 people on every call and to improve their emergency response safety, the responders' safety. And the additional 2 cents would bring them another $56,000, almost $57,000. Now, in this past year, Griffith had some challenges and with leadership there, and that has turned over. So now they're doing pretty good. They have changed things, but part of that is improving their manpower on the scene. And the chief who spoke yesterday feels like this will keep them shored up to continue on the trajectory that they're currently on, where they had some struggles this past year. The next department seeking an increase is King. So they are a combined department, so it's really a municipal department with some volunteer services as well. They're asking for a 12/100ths of a cent increase, not an entire penny, but just 12/100ths of a cent. This increase, which the county request is only part of, would assist with acquiring 2 additional full-time firefighters. Stokes County is recommending an increase from 8 to 8.5 cents. So currently, Forsyth County has a higher rate than does Stokes County in King. We're at 8/3800ths of a cent. So if Stokes County does in fact adopt what the manager is recommending there to 8.5, and the county goes to 8.5, we'd have the same. So we would no longer be higher than. And they also, another consideration is they have $50,000 in fund balance that they weren't intending to use this year, so it's not appropriated. So that money would be available to them. Now, the Chief Roberson indicated that they like to keep accumulating that to buy vehicles as they move forward. So they were letting that build up to purchase vehicles, but that money is still there. So the additional 0.1200ths of a cent brings in $9,300, which would be the county's part of the 2 additional full-time firefighters.
Damon, how many of the fire districts have a fund balance?
So all of them do, but so what happens is the amount that they get paid out of their fire tax district yield is not actually the total that you sometimes see on the page, because we don't want to overpay it, and then they end up owing us back money. So there's always a little bit left that they can request. We fully want them to have it, but so that we don't overpay beyond money that we collect, we don't always give them all the way to that total amount every month. And then it can accumulate if we don't appropriate it that following year.
Okay.
I would also say, I think King might be the only one who's not using fund balance, if I remember right. There might be one other one. Most departments.
And I think there was some at Mineral Springs, like 8,000 that they had that they didn't appropriate. They used most of them. The last department seeking an increase is Mineral Springs. They're requesting a 12-cent rate, which is a half-cent increase from the current 11.5 cent. What it would be for, as Chief spoke about yesterday, was capital outlay, so building improvements, so a parking lot in FY24, and so they are an air care site for that part of the county. So that would help with that in addition to just regular parking lot service. A roof repair that the Chief mentioned, they would have to increase their background testing, so there is a General Assembly bill where volunteer firefighters will have to get more stringent background checks, so they were putting in some money for that. The accounting fees have gone up, fuel, and then the replacement for defibrillators is included in that. The half-cent increase would bring in an additional $12,000 for all their districts that they serve, which is Forest Hill, Mineral Springs, and the Mineral Springs Service District, all combined would bring in an additional $12,000. So this year, those are the only three departments that are requesting increases. The last thing that I will note that the manager mentioned on last Thursday is that the sales assessment ratio will likely have a pretty big impact for departments. So traditionally, fire departments have not had to go revenue neutral, with the understanding that their rate would stay fairly level, and then when they needed injections of cash for vehicles and so forth, that this, when we did the reval, they could say revenue neutral and use that windfall to do those things. After the revaluation in FY25, it's going to be a pretty substantial windfall, maybe to the tune of 40%. So that is an almost unprecedented amount of dollars that would accrue to these departments, particularly like the larger departments that already have a pretty substantial budget. So that's something for the board to consider moving forward. In my time here, the only time that departments have actually had to go revenue neutral was when it was beneficial. So when the reval was upside down, you actually raised the rate to help them in that instance. So I just leave that with you as information moving forward, and maybe one of the manager's recommended board-directed initiatives for you to consider, just keeping that on the table, that there's a large windfall that may be coming. And so the county usually does go revenue neutral with its budget, doesn't usually require the fire departments to do so.
I think there's a couple of ways. Obviously we can put in a board-directed initiative around the sales assessment ratio. The other part of that is really just looking at equity among departments. And so, I don't know how deep you want to get into it, but during the year, if you want to, we could go out and show you what other communities do, because other communities handle fire tax districts, fire service districts, and sort of the equity among departments in different ways. And our system has grown out of the old voted fire tax districts a long, long time ago. The question as we move forward, is there a different or more equitable way to do that? There are voted fire tax districts, and then there's board adopted service districts. You've got a combination of both of those that have sort of developed over the years. But if you wanted to spend some energy at winter work session or something around just, we actually could bring somebody in from the School of Government to talk about funding structures for fire departments and those kinds of things. As you know, there's a deep-seated pride in the individual fire tax districts, which does impact the equity across departments a bit. And then you've got two departments that, we've had conversations about that are really almost municipal service level departments. And so, the question is, last year we talked a little bit about whether Louisville and the town of Louisville wanted to go into the fire department business. Was the time right for that? The chairman and I met with the mayor. He worked with his board and concluded that they still felt comfortable being served by a volunteer fire department under the structure that they have, at least for the time being. And so, and then obviously Clemens is the other one that, it's two departments, two stations, a very robust level of service, really almost at a municipal level. They have a little more of a volunteer, they're pretty volunteer friendly, and so they still kind of operate in that way. In fact, our intern Matt Pennington's dad is a volunteer at that department, and so so they do that. But if it's something you want to get into, we conclude it as a board directed initiative. I'll just take the board's lead on that. It would be the year to probably do that, heading into a revaluation if you change something or thought about changing something in 2025. I'll leave that, and we can figure that one out. But the fire tax district rates this year are pretty modest, basically. Damon's done a good job of working with that group, so thank you.
I do think talking about that sometime later, it might be good. Yeah.
Chair Martin, excuse me. I apologize. I'm kind of slow to the draw. I just had a question as it relates to, I guess, the overall manager's recommendation with the, looked like maybe there was money saved from 22-23 by youth services for the carryover gun and gang funds. And I apologize that I didn't get to that question when we were at that moment. But a bad assumption is that we have a lot of we have too much gun and gang violence in this community because we're underutilizing resources. The receipt of this could be that we didn't spend the money that we have from the 22-23 budget cycle, and now we're getting ready to roll it over into, it seems like, a broad category in expenditures, when anybody in Forsyth County know that you can look at the paper every single day. So I guess I don't want to belabor a bad assumption. I guess my question would be, in 22-23, what was youth services doing to prevent or at least to react to gun and gang violence in Forsyth County?
Sure. So these funds were actually, they were appropriated as part of.
I'll take this one, Kyle. So the board had appropriate these dollars to set aside. It was really kind of during the height of COVID. And so these were one-time funds that we were able to utilize. However, at the same time, we were studying the Cure Violence model, and then we are also funding a lot of programs through Juvenile Crime Prevention Council. And so all of that really kind of came to play at the same time. These are one-time funds, and so sustainability is certainly also a concern. And so what the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council really wants to do is go out and do a separate RFP process for these funds. We had also solicited adult probation to see if they had any sort of kind of one-time needs that we could also utilize these funds, because historically they do not have a lot of things to address the population that they serve, going up to, in in the 20s, because with Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, we have a certain age range that we are able to serve. So we haven't really been sitting on it intentionally. It's really been more of strategic to try to make sure that we are best utilizing these funds. And so for FY24, the goal would be for us to go out, do our RFP process for something that hopefully will be impactful to the community to try to address some gun gang violence initiatives.
So I think what I'm hearing, Commissioner Woodbury, there are a lot of parts of this, and so it is JCPC dollars, there's some one-time dollars, and then there's also ARPA dollars there. And so understanding that concern, I mean, one thing we could do moving into the new budget year is kind of create a discussion around sort of looking at that all together in some session, whether it's a morning session or a winter work session or something. We have relied on the board-appointed Juvenile Crime Prevention Council as really the think tank. Is that probably the best word there? As all these other opportunities have come through, we do owe you an update on the Cure Violence model. That's underway. Perhaps I build a board initiative around getting that in front of you. So quick status on Cure Violence.
Sure. So we do have the baseline report from UNCG Serve Center that I need to email out to all of you. It was reviewed with the Cure Violence Steering Committee, which Commissioner McDaniel sits on, as well as Councilmember Taylor a couple weeks ago. And then the Cure Violence team themselves are starting to canvass the neighborhoods. We are working to finalize their logo so their uniforms can be ordered and some other materials so that they really have an identity in the community. So they are starting. That's great. They're starting to hit the ground running.
And I think the strategy overall, because everybody's got a December 24 date in mind around the ARPA dollars, the strategy that we put in front of you, it will allow you to continue that program with, as we reconcile the ARPA funding, we'll be able to use some revenue loss to pull back and extend those programs out a bit. And so I'm careful to say that because I don't want to do that across every single program we have, but for something that we know is as top of mind as the Cure Violence piece of it is, and we're not going to rush to spend the dollars if in a way that's wasteful. We would rather, that's really how that funding strategy plays out. So,
thank you for that historical context. And it helps me to understand better, at least, the thought of how we would deal with gun and gang violence in our community, which is very concerning, to say the least. I guess I just want to be clear that the dollars that I see here, are we saying, Mr. Watts, that this is a part of what remains from the continuation budget, so it could have been used for something other than this service for youth services?
The board set aside these funds specifically for gun gang violence initiatives.
So they will continue into this budget cycle?
We're just carrying it over.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And if you have ideas for these funds, please let us know as well.
It's not my area of expertise, but I just want it stopped because, my community is like, Shay, what are you doing up there? I'm like, I'm just county commissioner. I don't have control over certain things in this community, like safety and that kind of stuff, but it's really bad.
Yes, ma'am. And we are already spending almost $1 million on a lot of programs that relates to gun gang violence through Juvenile Crime Prevention Council. And then this board also approved Cure Violence, which is $750,000 from the county, plus another $750,000 from the city. So there are a lot of things being done, but certainly we do want to spend these remaining funds wisely as well.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up, may I ask, do we have a schedule for effectiveness analysis on those various programs so that we can, going forward, have a stronger idea of what was working, what was a good idea that didn't seem to work out, and where we can more effectively focus?
Absolutely, Commissioner Bessie. So for Cure Violence, we did hire UNCG Serve Center to do the evaluation for that program. We also have a contract with Dr. Jeffrey Butts, who is really a national expert out of New York, and we regularly speak to him. He actually kind of oversees the evaluation component from UNCG. Had a meeting with him last week. He feels good about the baseline report and is also helping guide them on their follow-up, which would be in 6 months. And then in addition to the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council programs, they do have to report measures and outcomes, and if they are not successfully completing their requirements, then their funding does get reduced or eliminated. I will say we have historically not received a lot of new applications for new programs and new ideas, which quite frankly we would love to see. So we will, when it's time for that next process, we'll try to do even some more advertisement to see what else is out there.
It might be helpful maybe on one of our sort of morning session, kind of discussion sessions, that we included sort of this whole violence, arena as the topic, because it's not just Cure Violence and it's not just the youth, services project, but we also funded another sheriff's department project that was pretty substantial, with again, officers in the community, the JIT team with the JIT.
Yeah, I would love to hear about that.
That part, and it'd be nice to hear. And to Commissioner Bessie's point, we never really got an evaluation component for the JIT team, and that should be a part of that. But I can tell you that the evaluation for Cure Violence is robust. I mean, it is actually comparing. I mean, we spent a lot of time with the guy that found him, and how they compare match neighborhood issues that are correspondingly matched. They sort of track the issue as, are you sort of running crime out of one area and they just move over to another area because there's less hassle over here or something, because they're defined geographical areas. And this very guy has done a lot of research where it's been implemented in other places, and actually has some good longitudinal data. And what our hope is that ours will mirror that and look like that. So a session on that would probably be really good, particularly we got 2 brand new folks, would get to kind of go over, because we spent a ton of time when we selected them and went through all that stuff. It would be helpful to get all that together, and I mean, I could argue it's more than a morning's worth of discussion. And I think the very issue of finding, the creative ideas is a real important. I'd love to see more ideas, and it's a tough one. Anyway, that'd be great, I think.
All right, so if there's not any other, that's sort of the general budget and fire tax district review. The next thing we have is you asked a lot of questions that we referred out at the detailed review session. So you've got a list of those questions. You have the responses. We got the responses from the Sheriff's Office and from Environmental Assistance and Protection. They were in your packet yesterday, and then we did receive the responses back from the school. Mr. Krantz is here. We can tackle this a couple of different ways. The sheriff, as I talked to Randy, the sheriff's actually in another meeting. He's going to be coming sometime this morning. So I thought we'd just kind of push him off until he shows up, and then we can run through those. Couple different ways of doing this. We can just run down the list of questions, maybe ask Mr. Krantz to come up and kind of step through those, if that will work. All right. All right, and if you want me to, Tommy, come on up and we'll just kind of dive into it a little bit. All right, so you've got a document in front of you that says responses to questions from county commissioners, June 5th, 2023. Mr. Chairman, do you want me to just read the question and we can?
Yes,
Okay.
that'd probably be great.
All right, it says, so the first question was, what is the school's fund balance as of 6/30/22, and what portion of it should have been designated for Article 46 carryover? Tommy?
So you just want me to jump?
Pardon me?
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay. So our fund balance as of June 30th of 2022 was $20 million, of which $4 million was state required reserves that we're required to have, leaving us with $16 million that was unrestricted as of the June 30th date. Based on the analysis we had done earlier on the Article 46, at a minimum, we should add $4.8 million set aside on June 30th. The intent is, as we go into, we're closing out our books now on June 30th of 2023, we will establish the reserve, maintain that reserve on the Article 46 and any other reserves that may be needed. But at this point in time, I'm not aware of anything other than we will have the state reserve, we'll have the Article 46 reserve, and then everything else will be unreserved.
Yeah.
Sir, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Chairman, may I ask a question? Tommy, thank you so very much for this information. I just needed to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly when you said that the state is asking you to continue with only $4 million in the
It's a
unrestricted.
computation, and there's a computation that we have to do as part of
sir.
our audit,
Uh-huh.
and that was $4 million last year that we had.
So that means you have $16 million still sitting there.
We have 20 total,
20
less the
total.
state,
Yes, sir.
leaving 16 million that is unrestricted today.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that
Yes,
again.
ma'am.
Thank you.
So just to follow the train of your 16 minus the 4.8 to 11.2, I want to sort of get, you identified in your answer that there's another $1 million set aside for moving the Philo students.
There's a discussion that will be held with the board. That has not been done as of today. There's a discussion with the board at their meeting a week from today, and $1 million set aside is going to be the ask to move the Philo students. with that
And you
discussion.
still have sort of reserved your, I read the other answers about the kind of your accounting finance system upgrade. You still have that, does that include that you haven't spent the 1.3 million set aside for that?
That set aside never did get recorded. And so right now, there is no other restricted account totals.
Okay.
And I've talked to the board chair, vice chair, as well as superintendent. When we set up our June 30th fund balances this year, we'll properly get the reserve set up that should have been set up previously.
Very simple question. In your response, it says fund balance is $20 million, 16 million unrestricted as of June 2022.
Correct.
Would that be June 2023? Or are you referring?
That is the June 30th
that
of
was last year.
2022. We have not spent any fund balance this year, nor do we anticipate. So,
Well, you just spent some 2 weeks ago, like at the tune of about $3.5 million. That
Did not
would
spend
that
fund balance.
It would have been fund balance.
Correct.
If that money had not been spent, it would have accumulated into fund balance, which leads me into the next question is.
You are correct on that. So-
Yeah, what do you anticipate your actual fund balance? What do you think is going to happen this year to your fund balance? Is it growing,
I think it'll
shrinking?
grow. No, sir. I think it'll actually grow between $1 and $3 million.
So, yeah, okay, I think I've got that.
And I didn't mean to answer it before. I thought I knew where you were
No,
going. So I
but
apologize.
I was a little concerned with that $3.5 million bonus that you paid, that you were calling a supplemental payment, which the semantics, but that you just did. I was actually a little surprised to read that in the paper, and that would have become fund balance and was not budgeted. And that struck me as a little odd, I'd say. I'd just sort of as a comment. to do that. And it made obviously, in terms of percentages for some of your classified employees, made a substantial difference to do that. Was there any differentiation in terms of, a bus driver that's working 4 hours a day, do they get $1,000? Or it's just for full-time employees? Did that work also? Did that also go to food service people? Or is the food service in your enterprise fund that's not a part of it? I'm just trying to figure out.
It ended up going to all classified employees because the theory was behind it. So in PRC 71, the state allocated low wealth, and we did receive $4.5 million. That $4.5 million could be distributed solely to individuals that were on the certified pay schedule. And there was a maximum that could be paid out as established by the state. In that computation, which there was 4,088 employees, specifically pre-K teachers were excluded because pre-K teachers are not on the state certified scale. So we were in a predicament that we pay that to the certified, leaving us just using pre-K, where they're as much the same kind of teacher as any other teacher we've got in the district.
Sure.
To pay them the same, and it's a supplement pay as directed by the state because they're including it in retirement this year, okay? And that was their bold throughout their announcements to it. When we had the discussion, we could have paid that at any time during the year. There was a desire to pay the classified. 3 months ago, I was not comfortable to even say we could do that. And only recently did I get to a comfort level, where I was comfortable what year end was going to be, that I was able to, advise the superintendent that there would be funds available to pay on the classified in the exact same criteria, same mathematical computation that the certified has. And it's a straight, everybody's getting the same amount, whether you're certified or classified. Now,
there's a lot of differentiation between, how about part-time people?
we did not. You had to be, if you were a long-term sub, I'm going to use that for example on part-time, we included them in it. But if I was just a sub and I worked one day here and then maybe not work for a couple of weeks, no, sir, they were not included.
But a fair number of your bus drivers and cafeteria, well, almost all your cafeteria folks are.
They were included.
But
The
they're,
majority of them were included.
even though they're part-time?
Correct, because if I'm a bus driver, say I'm most of the bus, like the districts I've been in, a lot of the bus drivers only had 4-hour contracts.
Sure, exactly.
Okay? We counted them as full-time because they came in every day. They provided their 4 hours of service. If we needed them to go past 4 hours, we had them go past 4 hours. So we included them and treated them as full-time individuals, okay? Because their contract was 4 and they gave me 4 every day. Now, if you were a sub and you only gave me an hour or whatever when I needed you, we did not count those as full-time.
Okay, so I'm just thinking of a 4-hour-a-day bus driver, for example, that, as I recall, is probably making, they're all making at least $15 probably.
That is correct.
So you're making $15, so you're making $60 a day, and you're going to drive 180. I can't do that arithmetic, but let's say for 200 is 12,000.
Right.
$1,000 rate, $1,000 bonus was a heck of a percentage raise.
Correct. But that's how we did the calculation.
Well, as of you didn't do a calculation, you just gave everybody $1,000.
Well, we were consistent.
It wasn't a calculation, it was how many people are getting, do we have to pay? Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from, but the intent was you could have done a differentiation on the state side. Okay? The formulas that were out there, you just could not pay any person in excess of the amount established by the state. The intent of the district was to pay everybody the same. And I agree with you. If I'm a bus driver, my amount is much larger than if I'm a school teacher at the highest step or the highest levels. There's a big difference, substantial difference. So I understand where you're coming from, but that was what the administration desired to do, is everybody to be equal.
May I ask, along this line, This was a one-time
Yes, sir.
plan. So I'm assuming to the extent that you have severe understaffing issues in some categories, as I think your information, makes clear is the case, is it the school board's intent to do a more targeted adjustment to salaries in order to address those high vacancy rate categories?
As Dr. Martin, in a meeting a while back, because I'm still the new kid on the block and learning things, he advised me of a study that was done previously by the school system. And it actually was, the report stated in March of 2020. I've got to say, it's an excellent document. So our intent right now is to update that document because I think it addresses everything. I really do. Update that document, come back to our school board with that updated, and then develop a funding plan, let's call it, for the money that was in the classified request. You would have a true plan that you could measure it by month, by year.
So when do you anticipate you'll
I've reached
have
out
those
to
results?
the party that did it. I have not heard back yet. That was about 3 days ago that I reached out, 3 to 5 days ago. I think we can get it done in 90 days because it's just an update. I may be totally wrong, but my initial thought is we can, but no later than 120 days. I mean, it really is and I think Dr. Martin would agree, it's a sound document.
Well, as Dr. Martin has pointed out, we don't want to get into the micromanagement business for school funds. But on the other hand, when there is an outstanding request for essentially $4.5 million to address problems in the classified shortfalls, in the classified employee scales, where you have identified and indicated specific service level impacts from specific severe shortfalls in staffing levels. Part of our necessary evaluation process is the strength of the evidence put forward that this is an urgent need, that we should step up the funding for on a local level. So I suspect that you do need more funding for a lot of those categories in order to address those shortfalls. And I'm less concerned technically with whether we're just a little bit below, say, what they're paying in Guilford than, the evidence on hand that whatever it is, however it is that we match up with other school districts, we're not paying enough to get the staff that we need on here. But in order to advocate for specific additional funding in order to respond to that request from the school board, speaking candidly, I need the data to press that. And so the reason I was asking about the timetable was without our getting into the micromanagement business, which none of us wants to do here, when do we anticipate that we're going to have a more precisely informed request from the school board that we could act on? It sounds to me as though you're projecting a near-term time frame, but it's going to be after the time at which we have to adopt our budget here.
Yes,
today.
sir.
Thank you.
So I'll go ahead and I'll
Well,
ask more later.
Rather than me read the questions, if you want to, just step us through your responses.
Okay.
And I'm sure the board will stop when you need to.
Dr. Martin, you want me to just go, or you want me?
No, that's great.
Okay.
Just go.
All
That's
right.
great.
So y'all asked about the safe percentage in discussions with the board. They're at that $6 to $8 million range. That was a discussion. It wasn't an actual formal vote. But that would be in unrestricted. The next one was the HR director, been hired. The answer is no, sir, no. I apologize to the ladies I meant. The job was posted for 2 weeks. 17 applicants have applied, and they're reviewing those applicants as we speak to begin the interview process. How many teaching positions are funded with county dollars? Based on our November payroll, is 530 positions. How many locally funded positions are there in total, and what are they? Again, based on the November payroll files that we broke apart. Other certified staff is 62. Instructional support staff is 71. Administrative support staff is 46. Operational support staff of 956. School leadership of 54, and central office staff of 79. Total number of employees funded on local dollars in November of 2022 was 1,998 positions.
Let me interrupt you there, Tommy. I didn't bring the budget book that you gave us back in the salary part, but I know my memory's fairly good for short term.
We've moved positions.
Yeah, because the number you gave us for local positions was like 1,000.
1,053. So
1,053, and now I'm reading 1,998.
Primarily moved the teaching assistants over to the state. A couple hundred teaching assistants.
Moving people to the state would have made fewer locally paid people.
Right, and that's your number. I'm using November, so I have something that I've taken apart, and I could have answered all your questions and be consistent on a basis.
So
you are correct. We continue to work, as we've discussed, to move people from local to state. The 8,509 positions that we gave y'all back for the November report. Last 820 part-time or subs gives you the total, which is right in the 7,800 position number.
Is the 530 in the 1998?
Yes, sir.
So would that be under, I guess it would be a combination of?
It was just instructional. It was just instructional.
But you only have 71 instructionals.
No, you'd add to get to the 1,998, you'd add the 530 certified teachers in that number.
Oh, okay, so 530 plus those other numbers.
Yes, sir.
Roll up, okay, thank you.
And there are no teachers, the 530, just from looking at some of the numbers you had in your previous report, with what the cost of raises would be and some other kind of things, I was kind of getting a number in the 250s to 280 in local teachers, not anywhere close to 530. I was just trying to do some sort of rough arithmetic, assuming obviously lower paid, most designated, folks coming in with the local paid teachers. And so are any of those 530 is off of this November 2022, have some of those been moved to state funded?
Yes, sir.
Some of the 530 is not 530.
That's why I put in my response. Okay? Because to give you all the positions you wanted, and I had been out, so that's why there was a delay for medical reasons. So the only number I could give that I had a comfort level was totally accurate, and I could have everything be apples to apples and not apples and oranges, was a November payroll split. Now, we'll gladly take that number and update it for you, but it'll take a day or two. Okay?
Well, yeah, it's probably, it's not urgent. It sort of fits into the conversation that Commissioner Bessie's having, which is, in order to get a specific request for us to even think about it, which personally I don't like for us to consider, that's too much in the weeds, but we're kind of in it.
Right.
And we're in it kind of at your all's choice, by the way, which is another discussion. But the point is,
that's not personal.
No. I don't mean it that way.
I know.
I didn't mean it that way, and I don't mean it your choice.
No.
I mean we're in it because of the nature of the request and the way this has developed. But in any case, it's kind of like we're kind of not ready to address some of those extra things. Because we don't have any data to support it. And I'm trying to, is the 71 instructional support people, those are your teacher assistants, that are listed here on your list. So that's not a huge, number that's locally paid. I'm just trying to make sure, and I guess we're all getting hung up a little bit on titles too, because I don't know what 62 other certified staff are if they're not classroom teachers, or they're not central office staff, or if they're not school leadership. I mean, who are they? I guess we need a little help.
Yes.
A little help in understanding who are these people that are.
Let me respond back within just a day or two, okay?
Yeah, and I don't think it's, we're going to finish our stuff up by Thursday. So quite frankly, that having a number in a couple of days doesn't help much. We kind of don't have that, some missing data. But my point is, there's just data of just trying to understand this, which is problematic. And in fact, you sent me a list of kind of by a long list of titles, which have all sorts of titles, and it's 2 pages worth, to maybe more. And I say actually, in part of my response, as a part of that, it'd also be helpful to see of those lists, how many of those are locally and how many are state and how many, and I am assuming that all of your food service folks, child nutrition folks, are paid out of the enterprise fund and are not part of the general fund.
That is correct.
I think we clarified that last time. Mm-hmm. And they they can be on that list, but they obviously are not locally
Separate
paid
fund. Right.
for that, but they're a part of, of where you are. So, yeah, I think that would be, and of course, I'm a little curious with particularly the number of, the school leadership staff are going to be mostly assistant principals, I assume, and that's a fairly big number, because there's a calculation in the state formulas for every so many kids, you're getting an assistant principal position. So the part that a lot of people on this board do not know is how this all overlays with a huge state budget.
Right.
And the formulas are, some are positions and some are
Months.
positions based on numbers of kids, and some are dollar things. So it ends up being, it is way beyond, the state is just, it's too complicated. And as you've learned from being an outside person, it's like you have now gone to another planet. You didn't just go to another state, you're in another planet about how they do, school finance. I had that experience.
Yes, sir, you are correct.
Coming here many years ago from Kentucky, and I said, what is this? And it took me a long time to even what?
I'm learning every day.
Well, exactly.
Let's move on.
Sorry, what's that?
I said, let's move to the next
Yeah,
question.
can I make one comment about this? So Kyle and I were talking a little bit. Pre-formula, we were very intentional and very specific, and I actually think we even included in the ordinance what positions were funded locally. And so, because I remember, Dr. Martin, you coming a time or two in here, and we would, pre-formula, we would literally have a conversation about how many of this and how many of that and all that. If we move away from the formula, I think what the expectation is of staff in working with the school board is going to be to become very specific about what positions we're paying locally, and then actually include those, and then you'll be held to that. People are the driver for these budgets, and so, I don't, just looking at this list, obviously, our responsibility made huge commitments around teacher supplements, almost in a separate kind of arena. But, if you look at this list, the first 2 categories appear to me to be more curriculum, not really our statutory responsibility. And then the last 2 are maybe the school leadership obviously is more curricular related, but central office staff maybe not. So you got about 3 categories there that would be more kind of local in terms, and then some agreement about how we, what level. My recollection was your number, Dr. Martin. The 200 number is kind of what we funded in local teacher positions at one point in time, and then the rest was kind of in the other part of this. But coming up with a rubric of if you're not going to be in a formula environment, then honing in on exactly what's paid locally needs to happen. That way we know we're doing a good job. And to your point, making sure that the custodian compensation is competitive is completely what we're supposed to be doing. So, I mean, but you got to have a good handle on what that staffing piece looks like, and that could give the school board I don't know how comfortable we are saying here's what we're willing to, what the community's willing to pay for teachers. But that clear direction back to the schools would be one way, I think, of getting a handle on the local budget if we're not in a formula environment.
I think it's gotten totally out of hand.
Yeah.
It's just,
And I think the transition between a formula approach and really diving into the nuts and bolts of what we're paying for locally. So I don't know if that's something we can work on as a board-directed initiative, or we got to figure out how we handle their current needs going into next year, and then in a decision point about what the local staffing looks like. So that's my 2 cents.
Good, well, good. Just to, and to move us along, I don't think we need to talk, you've identified the teacher assistance funded by state funds and what that is, and you've given us some good information about your new, what we've called the Enterprise Resources Program, but your finance system. And it looks to me like you are pretty far. You've selected a system. You've given us what the state is going to offset the cost from. I suspect there is going to end up being some customization you're going to have to pay for, right, and some training that you're going to have to pay for. But it sounds like when you say that's on track, because our folks here could give you not a great report about how difficult that transition is.
I've had some conversations
the
with
challenges.
Kyle, and we intend to have more. Yes, sir. He's given me some hints of the challenges.
So where do you think? Where are you really? Or where are you on that? Do you have a contract with this outfit, Tyler?
Yes, there is a contract. They have the agreement with the state. So now it's taking, how are we going to do that third party from, documentation review, develop, how we're going to run parallel to multiple systems. What kind of dates are we going to go financial system first and then payroll, or do the opposite? Because you get into the discussion about year end and fiscal year and calendar year. So we're at that point, and we'll be moving quickly once we get all those I's dotted and T's crossed.
So you're locked into a $3 million contract
No.
So you have a contract, but it doesn't have a price yet?
There's a price, there's an agreement, there's a price, but it doesn't start until the state says start, because you're going through the state contracts. And we stopped it because they had begun this many years ago, multiple years ago, and it got stopped. The state came back because of the challenges that they were having with their conversions. So the state put a stop to it. Now the state they start with an MOU between the districts and the state. Once you sign the MOU, you have 3.5 years to do the conversion. If during the 3.5 years you don't complete it, the state can ask the district to write a check back for whatever they reimbursed. Now, if you sign the MOU and don't do anything, you just get where you don't have the dollars for the process, or you can't find the resources, you can walk away. There's no liability on either the district's part or the state's part. But we have an accounting system that come 2026 is no longer going to be serviced by the service provider.
Oh, yeah.
And there's only 2 systems the state's approved, Tyler and Oracle. And the Oracle Cherry Roads, Wake did not do it, neither did Charlotte. They both decided to go Oracle Cloud, and they wrote the checks 100%. There was no reimbursement.
I got you. So, but you think it will be around $3 million with a district cost of $700,000?
Tyler's pretty set on the 3, I think that, and then on our side, somewhere between 1 and 2. As we look at what it's going to cost to do the training, as well as doing the parallel runs that it's going to take.
So that 1 to 2 million is not in addition to the difference, the 700,000 difference between 3 million and 2.3?
No, the 3 is a Tyler number. The state's going to fund 2.3 of it.
Right. But you think your out-of-pocket total to make the contract work would be on the upper side, maybe 2 million?
Yes, sir.
That's way better than I thought that was going to be. That's good. So other questions about the enterprise system, all right? Further explanation on the bonus supplement that was recently approved, I think we've covered that. You've covered all those issues. And you do have a list of, particularly of several position vacancies and some of the ranges and salaries. And but I did read the paper, I mean, it was yesterday, in the paper that basically said, they gave a comparison of some of the disparities in salary, and it used Guilford, and it said Winston-Salem, Forsyth County bus drivers were $15 an hour, and Guilford's at $15.25. I'm assuming those are starting salaries.
Right.
And I can tell you that that wasn't a very good example. 25 cents an hour, nobody's leaving to go to Guilford to drive a bus. So Guilford is not a competitor for your bus drivers. Okay, so something doesn't seem, and those ranges, so you've got some bus drivers, I'm sure, that have been driving 25 years or 30 years, and at most they're making $3 more than the brand new person walking in brand new.
3 to 350, yes.
That's a tight salary frame on that.
We've seen that.
In any case, yeah. Can I ask you? You're not the HR person, Tommy. I know that. You're not the HR person. I know you, but there. I mean, you know, out in the county, you know, a lot of folks look at other people to match up jobs. I mean, matching up custodians and bus drivers, matching up teacher assistants and bus drivers. You've got contract cleaning people. Some of those people are part-time. They would love to come work part-time, and that wouldn't cost you the full-time benefits because they got two different employers.
Right.
And you've got a whole pool of people who are coming into school buildings every day with contract cleaning that probably could say, and most of that work is late hours. I'm just kind of curious. I'm kind of curious what all have you all tried to do in terms of enticing some folks to do that? Because what we heard last night at the hearing, I mean, that was terrible. I mean, in terms of the examples of the arrival times, can't start your final integrated test. Teacher stands up and tells us, I've been checking, I mean, here's for my first period class, they've missed 45 hours of instruction.
Right.
I mean, those are some terrible numbers, and I'm just kind of curious. Maybe it's just like we can't find detention officers. I mean, maybe it's the same thing, but I'm just curious. I mean, since we're into everything here and we're being asked to do this, what have you all done to kind of hire to get people?
I know that, you know, in listening to the conversations, because again, I'm not over that particular area, but we've been averaging in that 70 to 80 vacant bus drivers. And that represents 35% of the fleet.
I know.
Which, if you, no matter how well, and I've been the chief operating officer of larger districts than this, so I understand the buses, I understand the process very well. What they're trying to do is get as many people in for the training, and typically I'll hear there are 45 to 50 people that's in on training, which if I'm 88 short, it still leaves me with 38 to 40 buses that I don't have routes. The other challenge that this district has is because of locations. It's difficult for, we used to take a route if one driver was out, split it, and 2 buses could pick it up. And I may not be an hour late, but I only may be 5 minutes late. One of the challenges this district has is with the different start times and the different release times, it's difficult to marry the routes and piggyback. Okay? So it's almost a 1-for-1. Bus, school, which makes it very difficult.
Or bus, 3 schools. The reason those times are staggered is so that a bus can serve 3 schools.
But that seems to be one of our challenges. And I understand, because that's what I did in Virginia. That
bus routing program does that to save you a ton of money, and it eliminates wait time. We don't need to have this conversation.
No, I agree.
But we're boring everybody else. But the point is, those are issues. Those are issues.
And I know that they're diligently working to get people hired, to get them trained, to get them out on the road, because it's not hire and you start on the road. You have to go through training. and then pass tests. And then you're able to get onto a bus and start driving it with a student. It's not just show up. Even if you have a CDL license, if it doesn't have a school bus endorsement, you still have to go through the training.
Okay. And the only other question is your answer to the last one, which we'll have an opportunity perhaps to follow up with the sheriff. But the question was how much of the requested amount is based on, this is for the SRO contract, is based on inflationary increase for the same level of service, and how much is more services? And what I'm reading in your one sentence answer is you're not getting any more services and you're being asked to pay another $600,000?
My conversation with Jonathan Wilson, who oversees the security side, that's the exact answer, is that we're not getting any, there's not any additional services. So it was just an inflationary.
Yeah, and so we see it, we see it in our budget matched up with that. So Ms. Bussey or Kyle can clarify that a little bit. So, because we see it on the, paying it to them, and then we also see it on the contract side. So you want to enlighten, maybe? You want to, yeah.
Hi, Commissioner. So there is an increase in the contract amount this fiscal year, largely due to personal services. I don't see a lot of inflationary pressures on the specific increases. There is a large increase in uniforms, but that just seems to be aligning a little bit better with what the Sheriff's Office has been spending in maybe over the last 4 years or so. So the largest increases we're seeing are in personal services for salary and benefits, and a large request for overtime. And I think the Sheriff's Office can probably speak a little bit better about the specifics of that overtime request. And then there's an additional increase in the fleet costs. So there is no additional people and no increase in services. I think the largest drivers are the personal services and fleet costs for the contract price.
Yeah. And overtime being a big driver. And so the answer is it's not really inflationary as much as some expected overtime due to evening events and the school wanting to have law enforcement at after-hour events. But Randy, I'm sorry.
Right. Everything she said is correct. It's mostly due to now the market increases that the board has approved previously, the merit packages. Those are the main reasons for the increases, but also the overtime. If you remember back when we expanded into the schools when the city phased out, we went on, the COVID happened, and there was no in-person learning. So there's never been a full year of the kids actually there at the same time. So last year, and in this current fiscal year, we're having actually the best data as far as what's really going to cost. And so the overtime is going up because of a lot of the issues that you probably have heard about with the schools, security issues, fights, that type of thing, is increasing the overtime a whole lot more this year. So there's an adjustment, and we have reviewed that with the budget office and the school system, and they understand that that's a reasonable level.
Well, I will just say fights in schools don't increase the budget. It doesn't increase overtime. Now, if you are supervising after hours, it does. But having to fight is, the person's already going to, they'd be there being paid whether there's a fight or not a fight.
Or some of it's criminal activities. So if there's evidence there's a gun on campus, our folks will get there early, and there's also a lot of after-hours time spent at the Beatty Evidence Storage Facility doing reporting in criminal investigations. It's after hours as well. So there is an impact. It's just more, the more overtime is occurring in real terms to handle all the issues with the school system right now. And that's something we're seeing in real terms for the first time. That's why it's showing up now, a year later. We're seeing the real data now. It's the real effort.
And so just a reminder that the sheriff is a customer of the schools, and the schools have negotiated this contract and bought those levels of service. We do see the cost side of it really just as a function of its, because it's bought from the sheriff, and then so that's where the costs are generated in. that's where the formula came undone in a large way, because now they're saying, fund they're pushing those costs outside of the normal kind of increase in their budget. What it really prompts is, if we're going to be buying that, if they're going to push those costs off as a request back to us rather than just negotiating that within their own confines, then y'all are the deciders of school level of security, which is a really bad place to be. But so it's a conundrum. It is a conundrum. And maybe that's a good thing to think about as we take a break. Sheriff showed up, and we can jump in the sheriff's budget next. He had some responses to questions, unless there's anything else for Mr.
That's good. No,
Cranston.
thank you, Tommy. I think we covered it. And I apologize for asking all those questions if there are any
Could I
others.
say one thing to Tommy? Tommy, I know you're sick of hearing about history, but I'm going to tell you one more history lesson. There was a time when the school board did not have a fund balance. And every time they stumped their toe, they had to come to the county. And they wanted a little more independence from the county. And so the county allowed them to form a fund balance. So they didn't have to run to the county every time they wanted something. For me, in this budget, it's my suggestion that you all use fund balance.
We can take a break. There is, Tommy, if you can stick around, there's one sort of reconciliation on some data that Kyle had, that if y'all can get together on that, because it directly relates to some of the information that was presented that will be relevant. So we might need to come back to that if it's not clear after we take a break. So.
Good, let's take a break. Good. How about, let's go 10 minutes, long enough?
Yeah, Tim.
That was a long time. We're good.
Yep, you ready? Okay, we can kind of pick back up on our agenda. So, had a good kind of thorough review of schools review. The next one is Sheriff's Office, and it's really review of questions and his responses to those. If you want to, we can take it kind of in the same forum, but the Sheriff Kimbrough is here. Perhaps maybe the best way to kick this off, because I know the Sheriff just wants a moment just to make a few comments to you, and then we can dive into the questions. So Sheriff, Mr. Chairman, is that fine? Okay, yeah, Sheriff. Gotcha, Sheriff. And Chief Deputy, come on up. You can speak from the podium, or we got a microphone, however you want to do it. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Martin, Mr. Bessie, Mr. Woodbury, Mr. Plyler, Mr. Wissenhunt, McDaniel, Mr. Linville, and Mr. Watts. I appreciate you all giving us this opportunity to stand before you and speak. As always, I appreciate your generosity, what you've done in the past for us, and what you continue to do for us. I appreciate that. Today, I come before you again with an ask. The ask you probably have in front of you is for you to consider funding some of the acts that we have. The acts that we're asking, as always, is not for selfish reasons, but to better this community. It's to serve this community and meet the demands of the community. I was in here last night and I was listening to a lot of the comments. I saw some of the people standing here crying and asking for a lot of things. They were talking about the shortages that they're faced with in the various departments that they're from. And I realized that at that moment that the common denominator is there's a shortage everywhere, and it's affecting the morale, it's affecting the people, and the people are stressed, and I know that creates stress on you all. How do you divide and how do you decide who gets what and how much they get? But I just wanted you to know that the ask that I'm asking for, again, is ask that we're going to need just for small topics to start with before we work our way. I'm sure that there's a lot of questions as relate to the detention center, but one of the things that I want you to know, to ask for the additional deputies. We are currently too short on the sworn side. There's the sworn side, and there's the detention side. We're asking for those additional deputies on the sworn side. Most of you know that we started our own, first in history, we have our own BLET class now. We're conducting our own classes in-house. That way we are controlling our destination. We are creating what we need to ready our deputies to serve the community. And we're able to get them out there and fill them a lot faster by having our own BLET classes. Also, we believe that it's saving funding by doing that. And so when we looked at the forecast for what we're going to need to cover the community, what we realized is that Forsyth County is about 500,000 people now, according to what Google said. 420 documented. 420,000 people are residents of this county. Fact check me, Google it. That's what they have documented as of 2022, approximately 500,000 people. The Forsyth County Sheriff's Office is responsible for responding to this entire county. I looked at the numbers. There are 700 registered sex offenders in Forsyth County now. 700 registered sex offenders. Facts. We have 2 sworn deputies that keep up with 700 registered sex offenders. I was having a conversation with the district attorney's office. I was having a conversation with probation parole. More deputies, more manpower is going to be needed to keep up with the demand of what's happening in our community. I know a lot of conversations have been had. Well, there's an overlap of services. Winston is down. We just left an area chiefs meeting this morning with Charlotte Police Department, Charlotte Fire, all of the area chiefs in this area. We were in a meeting. That's where we were at this morning. And we was having a conversation about shortages everywhere. They were saying they are down 150 sworn police officers. So what I was told this morning. You know, you have made it possible for us to work inside of the city with the JIT unit. You funded that, and I thank you for that. It has been a success beyond measurables. We're doing that. There was a shortage in the downtown patrol. We answered that call. We have people in the downtown area Thursday, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. We're answering that call. What I'm saying is that the demand for services are increasing with the population and what's happening in our society. The bean counters or the statisticians speak that this is going to be one of the most violent summers we've had in quite some time. And we have to be able to respond to those issues. So that was the ask for the additional deputies.
Sheriff Kimbrough, before you move forward, Chairman, if I may, I just wanted to address something,
Yes,
Sheriff Kimbrough, and thank you for being here today. I know that when Chief Penn was brought into the city of Winston-Salem, there was supposed to be some conversation about the strategic plan for what was happening in the city and the collaborative work, right? So now knowing that the city has eliminated 50 officers from their rosters, what inner workings is happening from you, the Sheriff's Department, and the Police Department to correct that?
So what is happening when you talk about the inner workings, they're 150 short, 150 short. Okay? So what is happening is we have what we call saturation patrol. Saturation patrol involves Winston. Kernersville has come to the table and help out in Winston. Probation, parole, as well as the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. So Monday, any given day, you have an additional 12, 15, 30 working inside of the city of Winston-Salem. Working inside of the city of Winston-Salem. So the conversation that we're having, and I spoke with my favorite, I spoke with the county manager, and he and I was talking about that overtime funding comes out of my budget. Right? I don't have, or I'm not in a position to go across the street and demand that the city pay me for that. I'm not in a position to do that.
I understand that.
But I'm also not in a position to stand back and watch that happen and not get involved. I could take that position and say, that's the city's problem.
Right.
But I can't do that. I can't do that because you hear me say this all the time, that people in the city pay county taxes and they have a right to the services of the sheriff's office. So the manpower that I'm using, I'm pulling to assist in the city because, as I've said on many occasions, if we don't address it where it's at, it will show up regardless of your zip code. It will show up sooner or later in your neighborhood.
Right.
And we've seen that happening, and we are seeing that happen. So the collaboration is a saturation patrol.
Okay. So more 30 from your office.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
it's kind of still 20 down.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But are you saying that you're using overtime to pay all of that?
I don't know no other way to pay it. Unless you can tell me a different way.
Do you not have an overtime budget that you sort of target in a given year that just that's a part of your budget, overtime?
Yeah, I have an overtime budget, but if the demand is there, I have to address it. I don't know no other way. Now, if you're suggesting that I not send them, I mean, what other solution is there? They have to be paid.
Well, I guess we could all get into a question of what is the need, and does it take 12? Does it take 30? Does it take 8? We could all sort of get into that.
It actually takes more.
Well, that's now. So the question is on his overtime overages. Can lapsed salary positions be used to cover that?
Yeah. So last couple of years, we have been in an unusual position in that because of vacant positions, at the ordinance level, he has run up. The overtime budget has been very high, and so it has not been an ordinance level issue for the board to have to step in and appropriate additional funds for. It will be as staffing gets tighter. And so it's something that we'll need to watch. And we generally don't, we budget overtime at a lower level, because it happens in EMS, it happens in the sheriff's department as well. I mean, obviously, you got to have folks here, you got to have, regardless of whatever the staffing is, but that's how it has been manageable in the last couple of years, and it's really been unusual just because of staffing.
Yeah, and to
It's
say
not
that-
sustainable, I don't think.
Yeah, I live in District A, and it's not sustainable. I mean, my district needs support. So
Exactly.
I don't care how we do it, it needs to be resolved.
Right, and when you look at the numbers, of what is happening inside not only the city, but the crime, the uptick, we have to be there. That's just even to maintain or to put up a good presence. We have to be there. And if we're not there, I would hate to think what would happen. If I were to pull those 4 officers from downtown on Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays, I would hate to think what would happen. I would hate to think what would happen if I gave the order that we are moving out of Winston-Salem and going back to the county and just cover the county.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, when we say 15 to 30, that's not deputies, that's a collaborative effort with us, Kernerville Highway Patrol.
We have 8.
And so we just basically set it up, set the plan up, and pull everybody together. But when we have that many people, it's a lot of outside agencies helping. Usually about 8 at the very most from the sheriff's.
Plus the 4,
Yeah.
plus the 4. So you're talking 12 from the sheriff's office.
So it's not all.
So do you have a number a pretty fairly accurate number of the overtime hours that you're using for that?
Randy has been calculating that. Randy,
For that effort?
what was the number that you gave me last week? Over. I can give you the exact number. I'll pull them for you, and I'll send them to you.
Because it would seem to me that just, if you convert the overtime hours into full-time equivalents, for example, see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know if that's where your number of deputies request came from, but obviously you end up saving money with full-time people in that kind of issue instead of using all these overtime hours.
Right. So-
And then the money that is the real overtime, the extra half, if you will, the time and a half, that extra half actually becomes money that's not spent, and it's a matter of balancing the vacancies with that. And it seems to me that's a better way to sort of staff this. It looks like it work out that way. That's an interesting question because it requires your all scheduling and shift work very different for those if you're not using overtime. But you're saving 50% of every hour worked like that comes off of that, and it seems to me that could be done within your existing budget in a way that could work. So you get some, and he could get I'm going to use just 4 positions for that. Overtime hours saved, there's still some left on the table because you didn't pay overtime. But you got 4 positions that are used in that rotation.
Yeah.
See where I'm going with this?
Yeah, and I think that's...
And then it could be done on a year-to-year basis, analyzed.
Well, it really goes back to what your patrol plan is, and we fund the patrol plan.
Right.
Now, what he does with his people outside of the patrol plan, he makes those decisions, and I don't make those decisions. So the question really is, if you want those officers if you want that level of staffing, then you need to fund the patrol plan. Simply shifting overtime hours over to full-time positions without it being incorporated in a sustainable, known patrol plan, because the events of the day are going to drive what the sheriff does, and he's going to do what he needs to do to make that happen. What I think he's saying to you is the necessity of the city's staffing issues has made him shift, and so he's doing something that he would not normally do,
Exactly.
except for the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So I would... I don't have a whole lot of control over his overtime budget, we don't have a whole lot of control except for what that ordinance level number is. And so,
But you're cashing in lapse salaries to cover that. I mean, in that sense. I mean, that's the way it's mechanically being handled.
That is correct.
It seems to me that a patrol plan for the next year, because all this is not going to get solved in a year, and particularly, the city's planning to operate with 50 less, period. I mean, that's just you've had 150 vacancies, they're going to take 50 of them and convert them into, quite frankly, their budget somewhere else, and they're going to have 100 vacancies as soon as they get through with that. This is all on paper. So it still seems like you're going to have some of those same issues. It seems like your patrol plan could include X number of people to do that. Then they get funded as regular positions, and that gets reviewed every year based on, and it still ends up, the net cost still should be the same. You shouldn't require any additional money to do that.
Right.
In the total budget, it's more spent in full-time people, less spent in overtime.
From a practical perspective, I mean, and I think adding 4 positions or whatever to the sheriff's staffing model is fine. We don't really have any mechanism to assure that that those officers don't, that the events of the day don't just drive overtime up from that. So in my mind, the real question is, what do you want the patrol plan to look like? If you want to fund 4 extra positions in a patrol plan, do it. Or are you going to save money? I don't know. The events of the day will decide to some extent.
I guess it's, if you're telling the truth about your number of overtime hours, then it would seem to me that if you had full-time people in your patrol plan, that you would use fewer overtime hours unless we have some kind of 10 crisis next year or something. I mean, I understand we can't anticipate what the future is going to be, and
Chairman?
no one expects you to do that.
Chairman.
So 2 points.
Before you start, Chair Kimbrough. Chairman, with all due respect, I don't think that our High Lord Sheriff would come in our meeting today to lie.
No,
So
I didn't mean it that way.
Right, yeah. So
just saying-
let's be mindful, please, sir.
I was just saying,
Like, I would never
if-then,
come in here
if this is true, then this should follow.
Like I would never come in here in a public meeting, a recorded meeting, and lie to you. So I know that it was all in pun, but but I'll move forward. What I'm saying is,
Before you leave this, do you want to have do you want to have a patrol plan that includes that? And if so, it seems to me this is something that could be, instead of talking about, if you really want to do it, I think that can be done.
I would love for you all to do that. Thank you. I appreciate that, Doc.
You realize there's no new money in that?
Say again?
There's no new money in that.
However we make it happen, I'm great.
Because what I just got through saying is that you'll have fewer overtime hours if you have more full-time people in your patrol plan. And there's a net savings that goes with overtime hours.
So we can count that done and I can move on.
I think.
I'm kind of confused too, so where are we going to get those 4 people?
You're going to,
You got your share.
okay, I'll move on. I think if you all understand it, I'll move on. Okay.
I don't understand it. I'm trying to identify where the figure 4 comes from. I'm looking at the list of requests, and I see a reference to
10.
2 for evictions and 8 for field and animal services. Is that right?
Yes.
So,
I think that was just an arbitrary number that he may have thrown.
Yeah, I just made that up because he talked about, they talked about this roving, whatever, saturation, what do you call it? Saturation that has Kernersville people and all that kind of stuff and all these things. And I said, well, maybe this is weekend coverage.
Right, and so the JIT team is every day, 5 days a week. What the numbers for the full-time deputies, as is outlined, is to address those issues that you're referencing, Mr. Bessie. As the population increased, the animal services, and while they were going to patrol, everything stems from there to move them to where we need them once they're trained. Because, as I said, remember that the original number with the 700 sex offenders where we have 2 servicing them, we're going to have to move people to address the needs of what's happening inside of the county. And so these new positions would offset and allow us to do the things that we need to do, as for an example, the animal service, judicial services, all the things that are happening as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Martin, if I may, I do understand the, first, thank you, Sheriff, for coming this morning to talk with us and share with us kind of what's going on and justifying the ask. I do understand absolutely the frustration. Well, I shouldn't put words in Commissioner McDaniel's mouth, but I do understand the overall sentiment around, I don't want to sit here and belabor the point, well, my life is worth one deputy versus 10, or
Thank you.
my life is invaluable. The lives of the citizens of Forsyth County invaluable. And I think that we have to think sometimes more commonsensical to make sure we're meeting the immediate needs of our tax-paying citizens that keep and maintain this county as such. And what I would tell you, without going into my personal business, but post-COVID, I have had the police department come to my house about 4 or 5 times trying to help solve crime in my neighborhood through my cameras. I have specifically been in my bedroom, shots firing off, and I just stay in one place with high anxiety because I don't know if more coming. I have called the chief of police, I don't know how many times, at least 3 times this month. So I just really want to put, and I don't like sharing my personal business, but I just want this commission and the citizens of this community to understand that violence is high, and none of us, no matter if you're the sheriff, county commissioner, chief of police, we're all dealing with it. Everybody's a little stressed out, and I worry all the time about the men and women that's serving us to keep us safe, because I know it's that much more high for you, I'm sure. But I hope that whatever we need in supporting the overall violence of Forsyth County, trying to prevent it, this commission can work with the sheriff to do it, in a rational way, but also in a very personable way, so that we feel like, and we know that as citizens that we're safe. So I don't know how, to my last point, we're going to be able to not put more money in dealing with the saturation by balancing something else off. I think it's obviously you're going to have to invest in the safety, and I hope that we have the sentiment to do so, knowing that we're post-COVID and a lot of things are taking place that is just going on across this nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. I appreciate those comments. I guess I'll move into the detention center. I know you all had a lot of questions as it relates to some of the things. What have we done since the report? What have we done? And so I'll just list a few things. And we actually went back through the survey, myself, the chief, we went through it individually, we went through it collectively, and we applied what we got from it. We looked at some of the underlying things that maybe didn't just jump out when you first read it. But here's what we've done since that, as it relates to things that we talk about, the leadership. We've increased the leadership training program, opportunities requiring supervisors on all levels to participate in the various training. The Dale Carnegie, the training that we're sending them out of state to go to, particularly the command staff. I've actually moved over there prior to the survey. I moved over in a closet where I sit directly. It was a closet converted to an office where I'm actually over there. My office is over there as well. We have changed how we do in the hiring practice. We have moved some of the HR responsibility over there to where now when the applicants come in there, we basically hold their hands through the process. That is showing us great results. We're getting more applicants coming in the pipeline. We've hired quite a few since then. We've done everything from the training. We've restructured the manual on what is required at every level of supervisor, the modulars that they have to hit. Some of the other things that we have done is that to make them feel safer, the comment was they don't feel safe. We sent everybody that wanted to go through taser training. We purchased more tasers to deal with those issues. We've also increased the stab-resistant vests. We went out and purchased stab-resistant vests to increase some of the safety issues. We're utilizing technology over there that we hadn't used. We've actually built a new real-time intelligence center inside of the jail. Thank you for the fencing that you all approved to go up. And so we are doing some things over there to address the training issues, the leadership issues. However, I'll go back to what I said originally. Everybody that came in here yesterday was under stress, and they were asking for an increase in pay. And what I'm asking for is just temporarily $3 an hour. I don't think it'll cost the county any money based on the savings that we already have due to the shortage. All I'm asking for is a $3 an hour temporarily. I've heard the proposal that the county manager is submitting, or some of the things you're talking about in terms of bundling things up. I'm okay with that. All I'm asking for from you on that issue is the temporarily $3 an hour while we're
How
going
long's
through.
temporary?
Temporarily will be until we fill those 40 vacancies in 9 months is what I think we outlaid in here. I ran out and left my glasses, but I think I have it right here in front of me. What was it, Randy? No, 9 pay periods. Thank you.
Or non-pay period.
9 pay periods. Beginning this summer. Thank you.
And is a pay period like ours, 26 pay periods a year? So it's 926.
Right.
Sheriff Kimbrough, can I ask a question? I know that you were working with the district attorney's office so that we could try to transition some of those non-violent individuals home with an ankle monitor or something. How is that going?
So we have a population specialist, and we are moving people out of there as rapidly as we can that are nonviolent. But the people there are now are violent offenders.
Could you repeat that again?
Violent offenders.
Oh, they were nonviolent, but now they're violent.
No. The people that we have moved out were nonviolent. The people that we're housing now are basically nonviolent or federal inmates.
Oh, okay.
So every day when somebody comes in there that is nonviolent, we're working with them to try to get them in front of the DA's office, the bond reduced to get them back out functioning in our society. But when it's acts of violence, we don't touch it.
During COVID, our daily average population was probably around 900. When COVID happened, we got up with the DA's office and the judges and eliminated anybody that was just there for low crimes, low bond. We got that down to like 480 for a while, but post-COVID, all this violence that you see is happening, and we're arresting people for that violence. And we're up, I think, yesterday we were at like 748. And most of those people are violent offenders that, even if we work with the DA, a judge has to sign off on and don't feel safe being on the street. So they have to meet a criteria threshold to get released. We're doing that daily with the people that are coming in, but we're just getting more violent people in.
And the weekenders that are mandatory to be there by a judge's order, we've been trying to regulate that, but if they're ordered to do time on the weekends, we have no control over that because that's been mandated by a judge. So that is the ask for the $3 an hour for the 9 pay period.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
No, you've covered, I just wanted to ask a little question on the sex offender issue.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever, what has to, once you have a sex offender on a registry, what is required of your office?
So they have to know where they're at. They have to make visits. We have to know where they are, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, jobs, checkups, follow-ups, visits, home visits.
How much, well,
once a year, they have to verify their address. They can either do that in person or they can mail it in. If they don't meet that 1-year deadline, our officers have to go out and check if they've moved, and they have to try to find them, draw warrants for failing to change or failing to verify their address. And so there's a lot of movement that happens that they don't know about. Once they find out, there's a lot of felony charges, and all those felony charges come with prosecution book and everything. And so it's a lot of labor-intensive work for those two officers, because every charge is a felony charge. It creates a whole lot of paperwork that has to go through the courts, and so they're very overworked.
I was talking with the district attorney the other day, and they were saying that what makes this area so attractive for those people coming out of the prison system is because we have 3 homeless shelters here in Forsyth County. And so a lot of them come out in situations where they're homeless, and so Winston-Salem or Forsyth County is a preferable site because of the things that we have here.
So it would seem that a lot of the work that you're describing that has to be done to keep track of, to support, is clerical in nature. I mean, a lot of it's run down, it's reports, it's email, it's checking the addresses, it's seeing that ultimately some will require a home visit or require a visit. So it would seem to me there's a part in your planning idea, it would seem to me a reasonable way to solve that would be to take this, we've talked about temporary staffing kind of issues, way less expensive than a sworn officer. Seems like something like that could be a position that would be temporary, that could handle that, see how it goes, kind of, those kind of things. Seem like you got some options there that would make a different solution to a lot of the monitoring that appears to me to be non-sworn officer work.
We do have 2 civilian employees that does a lot of that.
Of the clerical work.
There. So we've got a total of 4, 2 sworn,
2 clerical.
non-sworn. And so we do have people in place to take care of a lot of that. Anytime someone doesn't, out of those 700, I would estimate at least half of them intentionally don't verify their address every year. And so just say those 350 people, 2 officers have to try to track them down, which is not easy because they don't have to send a change of address in to us or to the post office. We have to try to see if they got power in their name somewhere. It's a lot of things that we do, but it's a lot of work that
a clerical.
Just 2 people have to do, and they're like detectives. We pay them, or they're in a detective. But it's a lot more, I guess, involved. What it sounds like, as far as the sworn end is, it's about 350 people that almost like a fugitive crackdown,
right?
Every year.
And you couldn't have civilians doing that type of work.
How does probation and parole play in all of this?
So most of the people that are coming out of the prison system, they're on probation parole. They've been paroled out.
Right.
So there's a working relationship between us and them. But the sheriff's office is responsible for the registry. We're responsible for all of that.
But the probation is separate
Exactly.
outside of that.
It's separate.
Right.
Some of the offenses are
Lifetime.
registrations. Probation parole has a deadline.
Do they keep up with that?
They will keep up with them if they do something that violate parole.
And then you guys
probation.
connect them.
If they fail to verify or fail to change their address, that could be a violation.
Okay.
Where we would work together with them.
Right. But once they meet their demands on probation parole, they're done.
Yes.
They're done. But they still have to maintain the registry with the sheriff's office.
I got it.
So our work is forever continue.
That's understandable. Thank you.
Chair Martin, I would just like to extend the point with the sex offenders. Of course, you and I being educators, the liability around our children, I think, is, and they're the most vulnerable population. I don't even want to get into what it takes from an investigative standpoint to make sure that, all of us that's vulnerable to sex offenders, that we on high alert on trying to make sure that, there is no interruption in that, to say the least. So I don't think we need to be conservative when it comes to sex offenses, because generally the population that we're talking about a lot of times could end up being, our children most vulnerable, and then also, of course, women. So I appreciate you making sure that you highlight that out of your budget concerns. The other, I want to shift gears lastly about retention. And a part of retention is, according to the data that I think we've received through staff, that, the extra dollars, make a difference. But I think what we may be underutilizing in our county is just improving climate and culture. And so I recently attended an event that you all had at the detention center where families were out there and the community was out there, and it seemed like that was a great initiative to try to increase climate and culture through the Sheriff's Department. Do you have any kind of, anecdotal data or comments from the Sheriff's staff on what that meant to them?
So the event that Commissioner Woodbury is referring to is we had an appreciation day for staff at the detention center. It went over well from what I've heard. I surrendered myself to the dunking booth. Got wet a couple of times. They enjoyed it. We had the grills out there. We had magician. We had music. And they enjoyed just the camaraderie. They enjoyed just being out there and knowing that they are appreciated. These are difficult times, but I think that even though these are difficult times, people appreciate being appreciated. And they appreciate us doing that for them, to let them know that we see you, we understand what you're dealing with and how you're dealing with it. So it was a success, and I appreciate you all for signing off on that, Mr. Watts. But I appreciate that, and thank you all for coming. And we're hoping to host a few more of them.
I think he's inviting Dr. Martin to be in the Duncan booth.
No, I was going to say I'd have paid to go throw for the Duncan booth.
You know what? I'll sit in there all day if you're going to throw it, right? I probably won't get wet, but I'll sit there all day.
That's all.
Yeah. But it was fun. It was interesting. I mean, a couple of people didn't have the arm speed to knock me down, so they just ran up and hit the bar and knocked me in anyway, right? But it was for a good cause. So I appreciate everything that you all are doing. I'm not going to hold you or belabor you anymore. I just want to say that the things that we're asking for, it's not for Bobby Kimbrough. It's not. What I've learned in my life is not what you're asking for, it's who's asking for it. And what I'm asking for is on behalf of the people. I'm asking for things that are going to enhance the safety. It's going to enhance the lives of the people of this community. And so that's why I ask sometimes, may seem, well, what do they want with it or what are they doing? Everything that we have set out and we're asking for is simply the betterment of this community. If you look back, Dr. Martin, and you look back, Mr. Watts, and all of the commissioners, when we first started with the real-time intelligence, I need to set the record straight for that. Your county was the first to have one of those. Not Winston, not Asheville, not Greensboro, not High Point, not Kernersville. It was the sheriff's office. You all believed in us and believed in me to help me do that. Originally, there was some pushback, and you believed in me. And we have been successful. We have solved homicides. We have basically changed the trajectory of how people investigate crimes now. Everybody in this area has one now because you believed in us. I came to you and I asked you for the gang unit, what we call the JIT unit. You trusted me again, Ms. Whisenhunt. You trusted me again, Mr. Linville. And we have been successful. The lives that we have changed with the juvenile unit. All I'm asking you to do is trust me. I come and I don't ask for anything elaborate. Every now and then I might ask for something, but I don't ask for nothing. I'm not asking for helicopters. I'm not asking for a Corvette. I'm not. I'm just asking for things that are going to enhance the safety of this community, Doc. That's all I'm asking for. So when you decide who, what, and how much, I really would appreciate it that you just run that through your, and remember that the sheriff's office is asking for the people. And I appreciate your time. unless you all have any more questions, but those were the ones that I wanted to highlight and I wanted to be heard on.
Chair Martin, I think we talked earlier that we wanted the JIG unit to come with some other agencies to kind of update us on this violence and gun.
Yeah, we had an earlier conversation before you got here about Cure Violence and where it was and the evaluation pieces. And I mentioned the JIT team, and we are also talking about the youth services grant, gun issue, gun deal. And we said maybe we need to have us we have these morning sessions every quarter where we kind of get into some topics that are not quite as, take a little more time to talk about them. And maybe finding out, having that kind of conversation might be a helpful thing to do at one of our, coming up in the next year, that we have spend some time on that, which I think would be a great thing to do. And I appreciate your comments about the success of the JIT team. Just like to see how you measure it and see what that success is. The measure part. We had a little trouble with the ARPA grant coming up with measures for that JIT team part. How do we know we're making a difference? So it'd be helpful to get some statistical ways to begin to see the kind of difference that is making.
Good point. One of the things that we measure, and I'll be glad to share the data with you, is the number of guns that we have taken off of the street. The number of guns that unit has taken off the street would just blow you, just leave you in wow and awe. And not only the guns that we've taken off the street, but the number of kids and houses they have been into and mentored. If you see the pictures when we're taking those kids to D.C. With the help of Ms. Manning and the congressman up in D.C., it has been the buds and those folk that set up the tour guides for us when we took those kids. Those are the JIT guys that are bonding with those kids. When we took them to Alabama and Atlanta, those are the JIT guys that are mentoring these kids. It's the JIT guys that when we get phone calls and they say they need somebody to talk with the kid or deal with the kids. Those are the JIT guys. Those are the guys that are in the streets 5 days a week inside of Winston-Salem. Those are the guys that are putting in those long hours. Those are the guys. So when I measure them, I look at it never happened before, it never existed before. And if they weren't there, who would be taking those guns off the street? Who would be mentoring those kids? Who would be getting up at 5 in the morning when we have something come across the Real-Time Intelligence Center, when kids are chatting and all over social media, and we get
That's right,
what we do, and there's somebody. There's information that we dare not share out to the public that we have thwarted before it ever happened, where we have people houses waiting on them when they come out of the house with guns and book bags. That's the JIT unit. So when I measure the success, I can bring you all the data, everything that they've done. And to be frankly honest, there's nothing to measure them against because there's nothing that has ever been out there before. We didn't have them before. So you can measure them against what they have done, the lives that they have touched, the guns they have taken off the street, as well as the drugs they have taken off the street.
Sheriff Kimbrough, I wanted to say that I have seen much success with that JIT team, so I'm very proud that you challenged us to participate with that. I also wanted to say that Chairman Don Martin and I have been invited to Liberty Street from an organization on the Liberty Street. And I'd like to invite you too so that he can actually see real time what happens in our communities, especially in Cleveland. So, it's good to talk about it, but let's really be about it, like walk it like we talk it. Like so again, I'm hopeful that the invitation he will accept. You can come out with us and keep us safe in the community, and he can actually see what's really going on in our communities.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I would love that, Doc. Whatever you need, I'm there for you. I appreciate you. I know that you and I don't see eye and eye, but I want you to know that I love you. I appreciate what you do. And I look forward to many conversations, positive conversation. Doc, it was, if I'm not mistaken, when I think the county had their function over in Cleveland Project several months ago, and shots were fired. Not to discourage you from coming, but during a county event, shots were fired. And if I'm not mistaken, it was that went back in there. But that's what we do. And I welcome to be at an event for you. You're definitely going to need the JIT unit if you all go over there. But again, I thank you all for allowing me to be here. Mr. Martin, thank you. Mr. Watts, I appreciate you. Plyler, Ms. Woodburn, Mr. Bessie, always Doc, Ms. Whisenhunt, Mr. McDaniels, and Mr. Linville, and you as well, Ash.
Thank you, Sheriff. And would you put that "I love you" in writing, please? I'd like to have it. I'd like to have it on a card, so I got a little place I could frame it, put it up there, look at it every day. I think he wrote it as a note. He wrote a note. That wasn't good enough to frame.
Mr. Chairman, I was just thinking when Sheriff Kimbrough was speaking, that I had two old sayings rolling around in my mind. One was, speak softly and carry a big stick. I think that's the kind of man we've got as sheriff. And the second one was, walk a mile in my shoes. And I thought, if we all had an opportunity to do what he's doing on a daily basis, just spend 30 days doing what he has to do, we probably would have a different attitude on everything. But today was eye-opening, and it was you did a good job. All of us, I think, showed the sheriff and his people that we really do care about the sheriff's department and about the sheriff. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Righty.
So the third area is environmental assistance and protection. Do you want to take a short recess before we jump into that, or push on through, or?
What time are you going to want to break for lunch?
This is, just
It all
whenever
comes
you
back
want
to lunch.
Well, I'm just looking at the clock. I'd say Minor's been here all morning. Let's have that. Let's go for it. Everybody good with that?
Yeah.
All right. So, Minor, why don't you come on up and just use your responses as sort of the playbook and kind of dive into it.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here this morning talking about something that has been very important to a lot of us for a long time. And I tried to provide clear and informative answers to what we thought were your questions from last week around the operation of the 3 county recycling convenience centers and the optional subscription recycling collection service that is available to every household in the unincorporated area of the county. So as you see, if you have it in front of you, the cost of operating our 3 recycling convenience centers has increased dramatically in the last few years. And there are a lot of factors that influence those cost increases, and I didn't really do a very good job of enumerating those yesterday when I was putting this together for you, because I was concentrating on trying to be brief and concise. But I'd be happy to discuss any of that today or any time that you would like to. We've reached a point where our current and anticipated costs going forward are higher than I ever expected them to be relative to the amount of materials that are being dropped off at the convenience centers and the value of those recyclable commodities. And I think it's my understanding that that is the basis for the county manager's recommendation for your consideration in this next year's budget. We keep a close eye on these operations, and we have tried to identify opportunities to make the operations more cost-effective and to request changes with the contractor that operates those facilities for us to try to reduce some of the costs to the county. And it's not as simple and straightforward as we might hope it would be. But given that we have the population of the county that we have, and the volume of recyclables being dropped off at these 3 convenience centers normally being between 800 and 1,400 tons per year, I think that reflects that there's still not a majority or a tremendous number of people using the facilities, but the people who do use the facilities really value the access and they're committed to the use of those facilities. When the Kernersville site had to close January 10th due to damage from a vehicular accident, our phone started ringing regularly, and we're still getting between 2 and 6 calls a day right now. Earlier, we were getting more like 10 to 15 calls a day, people that are just curious and interested about when the facility is going to reopen.
When is it going to reopen?
It will reopen as soon as the necessary repairs are completed and approved. And we are going to hold accountable the insurance coverage provider for the entity responsible for the damage to pay for that repair. But we're not the ones doing that because we don't own the site, we don't own the property, we lease it, and we are letting the property owner and the insurance company negotiate the settlement of that claim. But I did want to mention, because it's easily overlooked, that still today, a large number of multifamily residential complexes like apartments and condominiums do not have recycling services on site. A lot of them find it not feasible or possible to have curbside collection for individual units because of the way those projects or those residential neighborhoods are developed and laid out. And if the like homeowner association of a condo complex or the property manager of an apartment complex doesn't choose to have a centralized recycling opportunity, we have a lot of, hundreds or thousands of people living in those residences that don't have a good option for recycling. And I think a lot of the ones that want to recycle are visiting our 3 convenience centers. We also have a few small businesses and places of worship that use the convenience centers because for them it's either not cost effective or convenient to have a collection service for them. So looking at the current year, we probably would have exceeded our budget for the operation of the 3 convenience centers if we had not closed the Kernersville site following the vehicular accident. We did see, just as a general point of interest, we saw a change in the volume of materials during the COVID pandemic. During 2020 and going into 2021, we had dumpsters that were remaining empty at schools and restaurants and businesses that were closed, and we had record levels of residential waste being collected in the neighborhoods, including the recyclable components of the waste stream being generated by people that were staying at home and children that were attending school from home. So I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. I would welcome any questions that you might have about the convenience centers. And if not, I will make some brief comments about the collection service.
Well, let me just ask this. If you're getting 2 to 5 calls a day now about the Kernersville site, when it's going to be reopened, if the answer becomes we're closing it, then are we going to get another? I mean, I can see that being a big issue. What am I missing here? It seems to be at least some demand for it, clearly, and it's just a question of, I realize the cost of processing has gone up, but almost seems like that's something we ought to do. I'm just trying to figure this out.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, if you were guessing, you've said you've received a lot of telephone calls with the Kernersville site damaged. So, but you're proposing to close the Kernersville site, yes?
The county manager is proposing or seeking your consideration of that recommendation, and I'm here to try to inform your decision.
Yeah, it's just
so you have informed it by telling me there's a whole bunch of calls. They're going to, if they've been getting a lot of calls all along, there's going to be a huge number of calls when it's closed. And similarly, I believe the Vienna Center is going to do, there are a whole lot of people, I think, that go there.
I think we could anticipate a lot of calls that would result from a decision to discontinue those operations, and I think the calls will become increasingly unpleasant for us as we communicate with the concerned citizens.
Yeah.
This is really important to people. People are passionate about it. When the facility first closed, we had a problem with people throwing bags of bottles and cans over the fence and leaving them piled up outside the fence at the curb, and we had to start making regular drive-bys to make sure that we were either picking that material up and taking it somewhere to one of our other facilities, or, you know, fortunately, that didn't continue because we were worried about what we were going to do if it didn't stop. But, you know, the people that were driving to that facility expecting it to be open, when they found it closed, they didn't take that, some of them didn't take the recyclable materials back home with them. They left them at the site, one way or another. And so we started getting calls about the problem that was creating, but that didn't last long. And we did have a prominent sign made and put on the gate to make sure people could see that it was closed for repairs, and that sign is still up.
Yeah, and let me just add that, you know, this is my recommendation. It is not a recommendation coming from staff, from Minor. And the purpose for me putting this out there as a recommendation is the thing that is different right now than it was in the past is that the folks who use the private franchise service did not have access to recycling. They now have the access to recycling. And so I really felt like it needed to be debated by the board to either continue, you know, things in government continue on, you know, automatically. And so, you know, my purpose here was to have a board discussion about whether or not we continue it, given that some other things changed. And so, you know, it's clearly, don't expect Minor to say it's a good idea to close the recycling center, because he deals with it on a day-to-day basis, and we've already had the difficulty of that. But I did think the board needed to, just from a policy perspective, you know, review what we're doing in light of those changes. And it, you know, there's some tax equity considerations.
But if we didn't do something for it, the same people that brought out all that stuff and said, well, we came out here and they're closed, they just leave it. If everybody did that, we would have a problem, you know?
We do have a illegal dumping problem across the county, and there are some other strategies we might try to impose to take care of that. But yeah, anyway, that's the sort of the purpose of it.
I did have one question in this regard. It sounds as though, from a practical matter, that there are a number of people who are living in situations, you know, neighborhoods, you know, condos, et cetera, that are just not set up for collection trucks to roll through. They don't have a practical access to using the pickup service. That sounded like that's what you were identifying.
Right, those multifamily complexes, correct.
Right. So it may not be as simple as now that we have a sort of a countywide individual collection option attached to, you know, if you get the trash pickup, you also get the recycling pickup, right?
No, it's a separate
service.
optional service with a separate fee that's billed quarterly.
So you could get either or both.
So we have about over probably around 60% of the households in the unincorporated area that use the optional garbage collection service. And then of those subscribers, about 31% are using the recycling service as well. So we have 16,000 households using garbage service. We have just under 5,000 households using recycling service.
Okay.
And when we tell people that call us, when we remind them that the collection service is available to them and everyone in the unincorporated area, if they are in a single-family dwelling, a duplex or a quadplex, not the multifamily complexes, we remind them that it's available to everyone. Simple as putting it at the end of the driveway once every 2 weeks, and somebody picks it up for you. Same service provider that provides the garbage service. We get a lot of variable responses back from comments from the citizens. Either they don't want to pay for it because they think that when they put a recyclable container or material in a bin to be collected, that they're putting a penny in somebody's pocket, and they don't understand why there's a cost to them to participate. Or they happen to drive right by the recycling center regularly on the way to go somewhere else, and it's just so easy to pull in the gate and drop it off. That's become their habit and their established practice. But, you know, if it's okay for me to say this, you know, we've reached a point where it's hard for me to say that, in my opinion, that the cost justifies the benefit when we're spending approaching over $350,000 a year to vert between probably 9 and 1,400 tons of materials a year when you look at the value of the commodities and the life of the landfill and all the things that I enjoy researching and looking into to be informed. I mean, we've reached a point in the last couple of years where I don't feel as confident that I can tell everybody that this is a cost-effective, great idea, because the cost has exceeded what I ever would have expected.
Those are the collection centers, not the collection service.
But also, if we look at the almost 1,300 tons of material that were collected curbside in the optional participation program from just under 5,000 households, that comes out to about 517 pounds of recyclables per household per year. So if you look at that and assume that if the people using the drop-off centers are delivering to the convenience centers a similar volume per household as the people who care enough to pay for the service, you end up with looking like about 5,000 regular users are probably visiting our convenience centers, which is real similar to the number of people paying for the service to be collected curbside. So I thought that was really interesting, just looking at that data.
If you combine it together, you're only 6,000 short of the number of the county. Well, obviously, there's some people that are, I'm sure there are people who live in Kernersville that probably go to that center that are in the Kernersville recycling from Kernersville, I suspect.
Right.
You know, that's kind of, I think Commissioner.
It don't seem like to me that it would be too hard to set up a system at apartments to where they could recycle. It'd be just the method would be the same, I believe, as a single family house. You got one container for your recycling, you got one for your regular, and you set them out on the days that they're posted. And then it seems to me what they would have at an apartment would be, they'd have two big dumpsters, that maybe more than that, but one for recycling, one for your regular. Well, I guess that people lives in apartments has to take their whatever recyclable or regular out themselves unless they send somebody to get it for them. I don't know how they do it, but it's still it could be done if I think we're not too much problem, but
well, I mean, I've been in Forsyth County since 1993. During that period, there were 2 periods that I lived in apartments. One apartment complex had just what you're talking about. There was a system where they had waste containers and they had recycling containers. All I had to do was carry from my apartment to the bins, and it wasn't a long way. The other one had dumpsters, and I could carry my trash there, but they had nothing arranged for recycling. And there was no regulatory requirement that they have that. So until and unless we're prepared to impose a mandate on multifamily facilities, there will continue to be a lot of people who would like to recycle but don't have any way to do it on site. And it's not set up for the large trucks to roll in and collect bins. And we wouldn't even give them bins because they wouldn't have a place to put them out where the truck can roll in and get them. So I think the question is, are we going to have any facilities available for the people who are in those situations to use? And I think there's an argument to be made that we ought to have facilities available. There's also an argument to be made that it's not cost effective, but there are a lot of people who are in that category of having a drop-off bin is, because when I was in the apartment complex that did not have on-site facilities, I would collect them and I would take them someplace where I could put them in a recycling container. But that was the only way I had to separate out a stream of recyclables.
And I guess another option in the big scheme be interesting to see what the cost would be with our three garbage providers if there was just a single fee for both. Or you paid one fee that covered both the recycling bin and the others, because it would be, because their trucks are covering a lot of ground to pick up those 5,000, recycling bins. They're covering a lot of miles. And I would think that their cost would be less than their current add-on cost that they offer, which I didn't realize had gotten up to, I guess, $20 for one of our providers. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
It's 20 and 20, it's 9, 20, and whatever the other one was. And it seems to me that might be another option, is to see if they would just provide it for everybody. There'll be more people using it and doing it, and they would be covering it, and it probably wouldn't be anywhere, it wouldn't double their cost.
So my concern with that, I've been here a little while involved with this, and my concern with that would be that if that were the only option available to our citizens, I would worry about a flight from participation, and that a significant number of people looking at what that cost increase is and not being willing to pay the increased cost for both services, especially if they are not very interested in recycling.
And then dump their garbage.
And then we have fewer people using the garbage collection service. And I don't like saying that, but I think that's the reality of the real world.
Yeah, and so if this is one of those things, if you want to put it on as an agenda topic or as something to study going into the year, creating some incentive so that, because we have a large, how many households do we have that either rely on the landfill for disposal? How many households are not using the franchise service?
12,000.
It's 12,000. So we've got 12,000 folks that are not using it. Some of them are taking it to landfill. Some of them take it to their work. So, I mean, there's lots of, what happens to the garbage generated by those 12,000 people? Unfortunately, what we know is happening to some of it, because there is an economic incentive to improperly dispose of it, is that the illegal dumping work that Miners has a number of staff people that are engaged in are busy, and so we know that is a reality. So if the board wants to have some conversation, I don't think you can get to the idea of mandating recycling until you get to the idea of some type of availability fee for folks who are not participating in the franchise, so that their cost of disposal is actually paid for through the tax system. And that, we've had that proposal a number of times, and I don't know whenever the timely point is to talk about that or not. It's a big sea change, but what I know is that the county would be cleaner if you didn't have 12,000 people that you really didn't know where their garbage went. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can say that and I know Miner can say that with a lot of clarity, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's 12,000 households, averaging about 2.4 people per household, and a subset of that group that don't use garbage service keep 3 or 4 of my staff members busy and frustrated, because the things that we see are very disappointing and have a direct impact on the community and the people in the community. And, we take photographs almost every week that would shock a lot of people to see that was taken right here in our county. This is what we try to address and prevent on a daily basis. And another general point of interest, since I haven't mentioned this, is county governments in the state of North Carolina do not have the statutory authority to collect a mandatory fee to pay for a universal service. So even if we wanted to do that, we've researched that pretty thoroughly, and we don't have the statutory authority to make a move like that, even if we wanted to.
I will say on that 12,000, there are a fair number of people have small, they have smaller little groups. Some guy in his pickup truck does this neighborhood and somebody does some other things. And there are people like, I'm one of those 12,000, and I just handle my own. The point is that it's not 12,000 people dumping their garbage all over the place. There are people figuring out stuff and doing, and in fact, I used to work, the guy used to come to my house that I paid till he died. So.
He was violating our franchise ordinance.
Well, that was actually prior, it was actually prior to, I think.
Our franchise ordinance was adopted in 1973.
He violated it. He violated it.
But to your point, if the 12,000 non-subscribing households were providing for weekly disposal, which is required by the county code, that would generate about 500,000 individual visits to the landfill every year, and the actual number is about 30,000.
This is a great topic maybe to end for lunch, so we can think about garbage and recycling over lunch.
So if anyone would like to hear a longer and more detailed story of the history of recycling in Forsyth County, please don't hesitate to let me know. Maybe we can have some time together in a different environment. Thank you.
We'll break for lunch for about
an hour.
Okay. Good.